And SportsCage brought to you by the fine folks at Regina Motor Products. You know, they've got a great selection, tremendous selection of tires at great prices. So see them on Albert South, Regina Motor Products. This is Don Hewitt filling in for Barney. Barney's on a family vacation and trying to get as many golf games as he can in. I'm sure he'll be very good at that. I'll be filling in for the next 3 days because Maz, I think, is off on his regular July vacation in Hawaii. Barney will be back on Monday in his usual big chair. I'm going to be helped a lot in this show by Curtis Gammon. Curtis is the technical producer for the rest of the week, and he's really the brains of the operation, not myself or even my co-host. CTV Morning Live's Daryl Rummel. Now, Daryl isn't just a host and an anchor. He's also, if you didn't know it, the executive producer of CTV Morning Live. It's a Saskatchewan-wide broadcast, and the show's going great, Daryl, under your tutelage.
Better than this show so far. I saw a banner come up called you the Professor. We have to figure out which one of us is Stadler and which is Waldorf.
Well, they didn't see my grade 12 mark in French when they said I was
the grumpy old men in the balcony. Which one are you?
I'd be the grumpy guy. Yeah, I'll hide it on this show.
Oh, okay.
We've got some great guests, by the way. Al Simpson, who's all part of the Red Sox ownership group. We're going to ask Al to explain what's going on, and I know you're interested in that as well. Bob Strumm, the former Pat general manager, is going to be on after Al. After that, we've got the analytics king, Keith Willoughby. It's early going, but he's got some very interesting CFL analytics to talk about. Arash Madani, he'll be coming by as well. Outstanding broadcaster. I never tire of listening to Arash. I do tire of listening to you. No, I don't. I'm just kidding.
Well, then don't go to a Red Sox game because I'm PA announcer coming up Thursday night. 7:05 first pitch.
Well, then that's a good reason to go.
Coming up to bat.
Daryl's going to be there. And
there you go. He'll telling bad dad jokes over the PA where nobody has a mute button, like their television at home.
Brendan McGuire coming in, I believe, at 5 o'clock. And you and Brendan just did in the huddle on Access, didn't
we were also rival coaches in U4 soccer this year.
You're kidding.
My U4 Chipmunks beat the tar out of his U4 Antelope. But I think it was mostly a battle of attrition when I had more players willing to play at the time than he did.
Right.
That's about it.
Yeah, well, that's fun. Enjoy those years with your kids because they're the best years. Okay, let's go to Al Simpson right away here, and thanks for joining us here on SportsCage, Al. And the first question I wanted to ask you was, what is Living Skies Sports, and how does it differ from Queen City Sports and Entertainment?
So I'll start with, well, thanks for having me on the show, by the way. And Daryl, I like your hat.
I thought you might.
That's right.
If you're on radio, it's a Red Sox hat. Got it brand new for my birthday.
Perfect. And thanks for doing our games. You do a terrific job. To the question, Don, Living Sky Sports and Entertainment is a corporate entity owned solely by myself, put together to just get involved in sports. And it is the entity that I'm using to be a participant in ownership with Sean Semple and Queen City Sports. Queen City Sports is a separate entity that's owned by Sean and his family, and Queen City owns the Regina Pats. So I think your next question will be, well, how do those two come together and mesh with the Red Sox?
So keep going on that then.
So the Red Sox, when the deal closed, will be owned by the Regina Red Sox Baseball Club Limited Partnership. So there'll be two partners. One will be Queen City Sports and Entertainment, which Sean owns, which will be the majority owner of the Regina Red Sox. And the preferred limited partner will be Living Sky Sports and Entertainment, which I own.
Okay. You've made very good sense of that. I understand that.
So, Al, here's what you got to make sense of for the people out there listening is what changes. People that love going to Regina Red Sox at Curry Field, what changes for them?
Well, I mean, nothing changes immediately, that's for sure. I mean, we don't get the transition to occur until October 1st, 2025. That's kind of the year end for the Regina Red Sox nonprofit. So underpinning this all, the main change is that the Red Sox are going from a nonprofit ownership that Gary Brotzel and Bernie Eisworth started many years ago to a private ownership model. Looking down the road, we hope that the private ownership will be able to provide the club the resources that it needs to compete and be a championship ball club in the Western Canadian Baseball League. And not only that, we think private ownership is well positioned to perhaps move a stadium and other developments along.
See, that's right. As well. That's
only
the major
private
police,
can do it, I think. Now, P3 in Canada, Al, it stands for public-private partnership, and I was wondering if you could explain that and how you think it's possible a P3 program could build a new baseball stadium right near downtown Regina or by downtown Regina.
Yeah. So a P3 private-public is kind of a financing and operating vehicle that is pretty standard on now across North America. And a lot of your viewers will get that. If you look up in Edmonton in the Ice District, that's a partnership between Darryl Katz, the city of Edmonton, and I believe the province of Alberta is even involved financially in that P3 undertaking. And that got the rink built and some other things. Same with Lansdowne in Ottawa with the park there. It's private ownership along with the city of Ottawa who did that development. You see the same thing at the Forks in Winnipeg with private ownership and the city of Winnipeg doing that development. The underpinning of it all really, though, is that many cities are coming to understand that taking on the risk and the capital investment to do these things by themselves is not always the best way to go if you can reduce your risk by bringing in a private partner. So the private partner takes on risks. And if it's done properly, it should really reduce the burden on taxpayers to be minimal and maybe even zero. So that's essentially what the P3 is all about. And so when we looked at, when Sean and I looked at this, we thought, well, the rail yards are just a rare opportunity. You don't see in major cities across Canada 17 acres of land that are essentially dirt, that are steps away from that. Well, it's a fact that, you know,
it's true.
What I just said is the added value of being the truth.
Yeah,
steps from Regina's downtown core, and it's just waiting for a purpose. And so our proposal with the city through this private-public partnership is to try and transform that site into something that can revitalize the downtown core. And it's about city building, something that we can be proud of and begin to revitalize the entire area.
Al Simpson's our guest here on the SportsCage on 620 CKRM if you're on radio. Al, the big question now is that Michael Fougere, the former mayor of the city, he this was his wish. This is all he wanted to do, was revitalize that area that you just spoke about. So when the Queen City Sports and Entertainment gets involved in this process, for years it was, well, the Sox are going to build a baseball stadium. No, the Pats are going to build a hockey. What kind of facility are we envisioning down there now? Is it a baseball stadium that's partially covered and in the off season we play hockey in it? What's going on?
Yeah, I for sure the vision is on part of that 17 acres to have a baseball stadium. But then when we looked at it, we thought, well, if you're going to take 7 or 8 acres for a baseball stadium with the other 9 or 10, and we speak, it would be better to have a piece of development where one complements the other, and it's truly, you know, a civic destination, not just for baseball, but for other events. So will the stadium be covered? I mean, I doubt it. But
I was being facetious. The $300 million football stadium doesn't have one. I didn't think yours would.
Yeah. Though our competitive disadvantage is weather. No, I think where we can improve things, though, and where the public can get more usage out of the ball stadium would be that, you do simple things like synthetic turf. So now you've extended your shoulder seasons. You can get on the field in late April. You can play till the end of September. We can't do that at Currie. And so there's benefits to that. But I would envision something in the neighborhood of 2,000 to 3,000 seats, nice synthetic turf, beautiful entrance, maybe a nice little waterfall out front, and then the rest of the development, complementary real estate. And when I say real estate, more plaza space where it becomes a destination that all citizens can use.
Now, I was going to ask you, how many discussions at this point have you had with the mayor and city council, or have you had any yet?
So this, Don, goes back about 4 years ago when discussions began with city council under the previous council and Mayor Sandra Masters. And I attended, and I'm just guessing here, probably a handful of executive committee meetings and a handful of council meetings to begin to answer questions on why we think the baseball stadium at the rail yards would be a great location as sort of a cornerstone piece of infrastructure. More recently, with the current mayor and council, very informal. Sean has talked to them informally. I've talked to the mayor. He attended the Red Sox dinner, so I took every opportunity to talk to him about it. But we'll see where that goes. I think there's a genuine desire to listen, understand, and see how the city of Regina can leverage private investment and get something done down there. At least I hope so.
This is all wonderful stuff, and I do agree that the private ownership, as Don mentioned, will take this team to the next level. The question that most fans out there are going to ask you is, what happens to my ticket price?
Well, I think it's just fair to say that if you have a better venue, more food and beverage options, that there's going to be areas in the stadium, Daryl, that are higher priced than what we have now. But by the same token, Sean and I have talked about this. It absolutely has to be family friendly, and I think we'll look closely at the family friendliness of our competitors, Okotoks Dogs and Sylvan Lake, where they've built new stadiums, and you can still take a family of four into those parks for $37, $40. That's very affordable.
See, I had to ask that question gingerly because I want to keep my job as a Red Sox PA announcer, right? I don't want to get uninvited next season.
Al might fire you if you ask him.
Right here on the show live. Let's break some news.
I was going to say, you mentioned Okotoks and Sylvan Lake, Al. Maybe talk about those two franchises, because it's sort of like the movie. Build it and they will come there, isn't it?
Very much so. Okotoks was doing what we're trying to do right now in Regina. They were sort of dismissed by the city of Calgary. They went out to Okotoks. They talked to Okotoks. They got a warm welcome, and they built with the help of private investment, the Siemens family. They built a beautiful stadium. And I can tell you that on opening day, Don, in Okotoks, the Dogs had 7,100 people attend their first opening game of this season. Last season, that's outstanding.
Unbelievable.
They had they regularly attract 4,000 to 5,000 people in Okotoks. You pivot to Sylvan Lake. Sylvan Lake did a P3. Sylvan Lake was somewhat similar to Okotoks. They went to the city of Red Deer. City of Red Deer dismissed them. They went 12 kilometers down the road. Sylvan Lake said, you know what? We're in on this P3 partnership. Sylvan Lake had a master recreation plan, said, we'll give you the land, we'll help you with utilities. The ownership there did the stadium. It seats about 2,000 people. They're sold out every game. It's probably one of the nicest parks in North America. And then I'll go up to Spruce Grove. The club in our league was playing out of Edmonton. They moved, 20 kilometers down the road to Spruce Grove. They're building a 3,500-seat brand new ballpark. Hopefully, they'll be playing in it sometime in July. And the league is just flourishing with new stadiums and new ownership, and a lot of fans going to these Western Canadian baseball games, not only because the entertainment level is good, but to what Daryl said, it's affordable. You want to go to a pro hockey game or a pro football game. Of course, you're going to pay more because you've got professional athletes, so they have to charge you more, and that's understandable. We don't have professional athletes. We don't have that same kind of payroll, so we should be able to maintain our affordability.
But you got some real talented players. Jackson Searing's worth the price of admission. So is Brady Bye from right out there in White City, Saskatchewan.
Absolutely. I mean, Jackson came from a team, and this is unheard of. You probably know this, Daryl, but your viewers may not. He played on a championship baseball team in the U.S. They went 56-0. They did not lose a baseball game.
He was telling us stories. He was telling us stories about tornadoes as if they were rain clouds. He's like, oh yeah, there's one over there. We just get down to the storm shelter. We wait a couple of minutes. It passes, then we go back on. Yeah. I'm like, what is going on? Can't imagine.
Jackson took a pitch in the face last year. Wouldn't come out of the ball game.
Still played. I was there.
Broke his jawbone and dislocated, I think, or cracked the cheekbone. Was down for 2 or 3 minutes. Went to first, stole second, went out to right field, and then went to the hospital. We couldn't get him out of the game.
You're kidding.
Unreal strong. That's Saskatchewan tough, and he's not even from here.
Yeah,
that's pretty amazing.
So, no, it's a good quality of baseball.
You just talked about 3 outstanding examples of how the P3 built these parks and how everything is flourishing. And it's almost like, it's like Lloydminster, Saskatchewan / Alberta. At one time, it was about 50-50 in Lloydminster. Now the Alberta side is 5 times the size and a lot nicer and newer. And that's just the facts. Just go to Lloydminster. I was there last week. And it'd be nice to see this province, and particularly the city, for a change. Don't let Alberta lead us constantly and some economic brains. Let's do something smart here, Al.
Yeah, I agree with you, Don. One of the questions that often comes up is, Simpson, why? Or I get anonymous sort of social media stuff. Like, why would you do this, you idiot? Like, we need to solve homelessness. We've got other issues in the city of Regina, and who's going to deny that you don't want to solve homelessness? You'd be idiotic to say that because it's a real issue. But I think what we have to have and put in perspective here is we need to invest in ourselves. We need to grow our tax base to be able to do the homelessness thing and get rid of and eradicate poverty. And there's no goal line on that, but to be able to offer those sort of social services. I'll give you an example, Don. Mm-hmm. If you're in Calgary, the city of Calgary builds a bridge. Let's say it costs 100 feet over the Bow River. It costs $1.5 million, and there's 1.5 million people. So it's effectively $1 a person to build that bridge. You build that same bridge in Regina for the same cost, 250,000 people, it's $6. They've got a larger tax base. They invest in themselves. Right. The city grows. You have more money for better infrastructure and homelessness. So, yeah, we need to invest in ourselves. And I think the P3 is a way for the city to mitigate the operational costs because the private guys would operate. It's a way to mitigate overruns on construction. It's a way to mitigate maintenance with very little risk and burden on the taxpayer. That
makes so much sense.
I'm just trying to keep my job as a PA announcer for the Red Sox. First pitch, July tomorrow, 7:05.
Daryl, you were solid when you put the hat on. It was
Thank you. See, there we go. All right, there we go.
Curtis, how much time do we have
Beautiful
left?
Brand new Red Sox hat for my birthday.
I'm lost. Okay, I had to check that. You're such a baseball fan, Al. How did that all start for you personally?
Well, I played baseball in Regina in the Kiwanis Boys League with a colleague of yours, Kevin Gallant.
Oh, yes.
And our little league our Little League team went 33-0. We won the city championship. And
wow.
I just enjoyed it.
That's cool.
The Pirates, Kiwanis. And then actually Kevin and I went on and coached the Pirates to a city championship when we were in our, I guess, late 20s. We found that to be a lot of fun. So I just have an affinity for the game, and I enjoy it. And it's different than watching, as you know, football or hockey. It's very social. You can have a conversation and miss 10 minutes of a game and really not miss much.
Yeah, it's the American's favorite pastime or whatever it's called. You have one more question at all, Daryl?
I want to know if Don can be the mascot at any one point.
Yeah.
If you
I
have a defibrillator. Yeah.
Go out there and take some pictures with the kids.
Don, I may be squeaking out of school here, but weren't you one of the original Gainer the Gopher?
I was, but I'm not applying for the Red Sox mascot job at this time, Al.
Because the resume would be great.
Yeah. By the way, Kevin Glant always bragged to me that he was a power hitter in baseball. Is he telling the truth?
I'm not going to go there.
Yes. I forgot to text him that you were on today, but we're going to repeat the interview possibly at 5:30. Anyway, thanks a lot for joining us, Al. Very interesting information. I'm sure everybody really appreciated the insight. SportsCage will continue in just a moment. You know what? Guests, including Bob Strumm on SportsCage, appear on the Western Pizza Hotline. It's the pizza, well, it's known worldwide for a reason. Loaded with toppings of Western Canadian ingredients and always cooked to absolute perfection. Mr. Daryl and Bob Strumm joins us from the beautiful city of Las Vegas. The former Pat general manager and head coach, worked many years in the NHL, still works with NHL folks on scouting, and is an inductee of the Regina Sports Hall of Fame. I was there when Bob was inducted, and it was an outstanding evening with Bob and many of his former players. Bob, Daryl Rummel from CTV is joining me as well. And I guess let's start off with something that's very dear to your heart, the Regina Pats. And the Pats selected the best goalie in Slovakia in the import draft, selected by the current Pat general manager, Dale Durkach. And Bob, you went to Manitoba one day and you talked to Dale Durkach, I think in his kitchen. You were the only guy that believed in him because he was so small. Boy, did you turn out to be right, as the prolific scorer that he was both with the Pats and in Europe. So how do you feel now that he's got your old job, the Pats general manager?
Well, two things. My visit to Winnipeg started a lifelong friendship, which is as strong today as it's ever been. I talked to Dale. He's so excited about sitting in the chair that I used to sit in a long time ago.
Yeah.
And secondly, it's great for the Pats. Dale is a sharp guy. Funny how things go full circle, eh? You know, it's he was such a star as a player, and now he's back wearing the hat. So, you know, I couldn't be more excited for him and for the Pats and for the fans. And let's LFG Pats.
Bob, it's 29 degrees or so here in Regina, Saskatchewan. What are you facing in Las Vegas right now?
I don't know. Once it gets over 100, I don't check the temperature. So.
That's what I say about Don when it comes to be his birthday.
The good thing about that, when the temperature gets over 100, and I decide to golf anyway, I can sometimes beat the temperature.
Bob, why did you believe in Dale so much?
Energy. You know, I saw myself in him. I mean, I didn't play long as a kid, but my passion for the game was always there. It's still there today. I mean, so, you know, I just that was the first thing I noticed. And then, of course, the ability and size was never a factor with me. After I left Regina, we had Ray Whitney in Spokane, who turned out to be one of the great little players as well. And then I came to Vegas and signed a guy named Patrice Lefebvre, who was the best player in the league at 5'7", 8'6", whatever he was. So I'm not very big myself, and I guess I'm just a guy that gives the talented little guys a chance to play.
Proving good things come in small packages sometimes. You got to like that.
That's right. Now, Bob, being right in Vegas, probably the biggest deal of the last few days in the NHL was Mitch Marner going to Vegas, 8 years, $96 million. It's a mind-boggling money now as it continues to escalate, and I'm talking about NHL salaries. What did you think about both the signing of Marner and also the sad news of Peter Angelo having to retire?
Well, it's a big name city. That's what it is. I mean, I think Marner arriving on the Strip is the biggest thing since Elvis got here, for Christ's sake. You know?
That's right.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Well, he's making a hell of a lot more than Elvis
Sure did.
I can tell you that.
Yeah.
And Peter Angelo, Petro, it's too bad with Peter Angelo. I mean, he's been one of my favorites even before he got here to Vegas. But you could tell he was laboring and struggling at the end of the season. He came back, he played in the playoffs, but wasn't himself. And I'm not surprised that he's going to take some time off. I think he's indicating that he might be retiring, but it'll be interesting to see if he has successful surgery and, you know, he might be able to play again. That's for down the road. But no, that's sad. Very, very sad. Terrific guy, terrific family guy, and terrific hockey player. So I think he was actually looking forward to playing in the Olympics next year in Italy, and that's out the window. So I feel badly for him. But, you know, Kelly McCrimmon, the magician, he'll figure it out. I was looking at their lines yesterday.
Yeah.
They got a pretty good. I don't know. It might be Vegas and Florida in the final again. You know, who's going to beat those two teams? Edmonton's right there. They didn't get. They were probably. I thought they had a better team this year, but were probably farther away. Lost in 6 instead of 7. So I don't know. I mean, can both those teams win their conferences? Florida 4 years in a row and Edmonton 3 years in a row. I don't know. It's a very competitive league, a lot of parity, and it'll be interesting to see. I've just been following all they're up to about 185 transactions. That's an average of about 6 per team. I mean, guys are on the trampoline, aren't they? They're just jumping and jumping and jumping.
Now, the Oilers lost Corey Perry, Connor Brown, John Klingberg, Evander Kane, and very difficult, and they couldn't do it, upgraded goalie. They got Magnupani, though, who's a pretty good little player up. Do you think the Oilers can still do it next year, or do they just not have a goalie, Bob, because they're ping-ponging back and forth their goalies, and I've never seen a team win the Stanley Cup doing that?
No, exactly. You know, I don't know. I mean, I'm not blaming it all on the goaltending, but certainly they're more of a high-end team, not a 20 for 20 team, and so I don't know how their depth gets any better. I mean, you can go out and sign all the guys you want, but it still comes down to the 4, 5, 6 guys that they've got. You know, Bouchard, McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins. Hyman, they missed Hyman in the playoffs. They really did. He's a top end player / goal scorer. So, but I don't know. I mean, the West is always very competitive, and I know that Kelly's sitting in his chair in the office right now, thinking about getting back at the Oilers. They beat them in 5 in the spring there, so they weren't very happy about that.
Bob Strumm with us, Regina Pats coaching legend. I'm looking at the 1984-85 roster when Bob coached the team to a 43-28 1-0 record. And on the roster, I see Stu Grimson. 71 games, 24 goals, 32 assists. Everybody, Bob, that I've ever come across has a great Stu Grimson story. Do you have one too?
I got a couple that I can't tell.
Okay, let me rephrase. Do you have a Stu Grimson story that you can tell?
Yeah.
Well, he just, I don't know whether I can explain it enough, but I stay in touch with Grimmer, one of my all-time faves. I've got many of them. But he just had a birthday. I think it might have been, would it have been his 60th birthday?
Pretty close. Pretty close.
And anyway, my name, they were playing some TikTok game at his birthday dinner. I guess there's a game in TikTok where you mention somebody's name. And he sent me the video of it, and somebody at the table said Bob Strumm all of a sudden. and Grimmer just freaked out. Like he thought I was going to be there. And I said, Grimmer, if you had invited me, I'd have been there. So yeah, but the best Grimson story goes way back. Glenn Dirk, my head guy, my head scout, one of my best friends, rest in peace. Glenn passed away last summer, and he lived in Kamloops, and he was driving by a movie theater, and there was a big scuffle in front of the theater, and some big stud was kicking the bones out of somebody else, and he stopped his car, and when it was all over, he grabbed the kid and asked him what his name was, and he said, "Can you skate?" He said, "What do you mean, can I skate? I play for the Kamloops Midget B team. Of course I can skate." And Glenn said, "Well, I got news for you. You're coming to the Regina Pats training camp."
Wow. That's like Fulton Reed Mighty Ducks lore right there.
That's it.
Right?
That's a true story.
Oh, boy.
Amazing. Amazing.
What a career, what a guy. He went back. He had his law degree, for Christ's sake. After he was done, he went
brilliant
back.
guy.
So but he was one tough hombre. He when he came to camp, we were going to keep him, and his dad was big man, RCMP officer. And he said to me, changing the conversation a little bit, he said, "I know what plans you got for my son, and he's not going to be that. So I'm taking him home." So in the car they get, and thank God for human nature, they stopped at Medicine Hat because I think Stu's dad had to use the latrine. And he was in there for a while, and Stu got on the payphone, called me collect, and said, "Mr. Strumm, don't give my job away. I'll be back."
Oh,
incredible!
Whoa,
I told you, Don. Everybody's got a Stu story, and that's fantastic.
Well, those are the two that I remember. I mean, there's others.
I want to hear the 2 or 3 that you can't tell us. We'll do that off the air.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. There was. There's one that was hilarious that Bobby Lowe's tells that I can't tell.
Fair enough.
I want to go back just quickly to the NHL here, Bob. And you mentioned, who knows, maybe Florida and Vegas will be in the Stanley Cup final next year. And, of course, both states, Nevada and Florida, no taxes, which is a huge advantage for those teams. And we're going to see if the NHL is going to try to make it a little more fair. What do you think about that?
Well, both Nevada, I don't pay any tax here either. I don't have to worry about it. I'm not making near as much as I used to, but no, I mean, you know what? I think Bill Zito, the GM of Florida, said it best. Like, we're the only team that's ever won the Stanley Cup. Like, won a couple, but St. Louis, Washington, the parity in the league is such that. I guess it's an issue because they're winning. Tampa and Florida won what? And Vegas won what? 5 of the last 7 Stanley Cups. So maybe it's an issue. But I think it's more about culture. You know, I mean, Bennett and Ekblad for sure took a home discount to stay, and Marchand got his spread out over 6 years. I don't know if he'll play when he's 42, but you know, players want to, and same here. Players want to play here. You know what? This is a funny story. When I was in high school in Saskatoon, I was a big boxing fan, big Muhammad Ali fan, and that's how old I am. But I said to my buddies one day, I said, you know what? I just want to go to Vegas one time to see a big fight. So in 1993, I came one time and never left.
Well, that's one way to do it. That's one way to do it.
Not a bad idea. What about...
That's how you do it.
But Don, the commissioner of the National Hockey...
It's a one-timer for life, boys. That's what it's called.
Fair enough. The commissioner of the National Hockey League said it wasn't a problem up until they started winning. So I don't think there's any plans to just do your best, sign your players, and make it a place you want to go, like Bob says.
Well, here's an interesting...
I think the one thing they're talking about addressing is the cap for the playoffs. I think that's an issue that, you know, that Vegas did it with Stone, and Tampa did it with Kucherov, and Florida did it with Tkachuk, and, you know, oops, gee whiz, he's ready to oh, gosh, he's ready.
Imagine that. Yeah, he's healed.
Gosh,
how miraculous.
He's ready to play. So, yeah, I think that's the one issue that might be on the board come playoffs, you know, to have some sort of cap in the playoffs.
Now, just going back to these contracts that have been flying around lately, Bob, at 37 years of age, Brad Marchand of the Florida Panthers gets a 6-year deal. I think it's a $5.25 million cap hit. The contract will take him right to the age of 43. So is it just a sort of what's to come where rich owners, I mean, Brad Marchand's not going to be playing very good hockey at 43. Is this a point where just the rich owners are just going to blow off? They can afford to just blow off the last 2-3 years of a contract and just keep rolling?
Well, there are different scenarios. I mean, maybe they'll buy him out. Maybe they'll, you know, I don't know. But he's the type of guy that might play forever. But, you know, it's funny. I mean, everybody's on a budget, some higher than others, but there is a cap. So, you know, if you watch Florida play, and I don't know how many games you get up there, but 4 or 5 years ago, there were so many empty seats in the lower bowl that they should have put mannequins in them. Seriously. And now, holy mackerel, you can't get a ticket. Keith, winning does funny things. If we came to Regina, the Agrodome was, you know, there were pigeons flying around the Agrodome.
Yeah.
Holy mackerel. We started to win. Guess what? For 6-7 years, you couldn't get a seat. You know, that's a little bit of an exaggeration because, you know, we were, until the Riders were done, hey, go Riders, 4-0, boys. Once a Rider, always a Rider. But you know what? It's all about winning. It's all about performance. Now, if the state tax helps a little bit in that regard, tough luck. But it's all about winning, and people love to follow winners. And it's amazing how popular you get when your team's winning. I mean, I came to Vegas here in '93, and we had an expansion team, but Strummer had some great contacts in the business, and we were independent. We were the only independent team. We weren't affiliated with anybody. I didn't win any popularity contests, but we put a team together in 3 months that won the regular season, our first year. Well, and it was on weekends, boys. People say Vegas. On weekends, we were playing in a basketball arena and had 9,000 or 10,000 people at the games.
That's why you're legendary. That's why you were easily one of the greatest pad general managers of all time.
And discovered a legend in Dale Durkach who's going to bring more fans back into that building,
right.
Watching guys like Liam Pugh and Maddox Schultz from right here in Regina.
That's right, yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Bob, for joining us. We really appreciate your insight and, above all, your humor. SportsCage will continue in just a moment. And let's go to our sports ticker. Nikolai Ehlers, I think it's going to be former Winnipeg Jet, still hasn't decided as to where he's going to his next NHL stop. I wanted to go over the CFL schedule, if I could, for this week. Of course, the Roughriders are on a bye week, much needed bye week for their injuries, but there's a full slate of 4 other games. Tomorrow night, Mark Steven calls the action. Daryl Rummel for the Calgary Stampeders on radio. Winnipeg playing in Calgary. Hamilton in Toronto on Friday night. Saturday got BC in Montreal and Ottawa at Edmonton. And of course, other CFL news that I think was probably instigated by the new commissioner, Stuart Johnston, Mr. Daryl Rummel, was CFL negotiation lists are now wide open. All 45-man negotiation lists are available for the public, and they'll change as they're updated. We're going to see it all. The Roughriders have Canadian and NFL receiver Chase Claypool.
Who gets you most excited about this list?
Well,
so one thing it's going to do is it's going to get CFL fans talking, which is what they want.
On the list, I wanted to add that Chase Claypool's mother was born in Hudson's Bay, Saskatchewan, so maybe there's a chance. Now, who's the most exciting? Well, we got Trey Lance on Saskatchewan's list, too, a high draft pick of the San Francisco 49ers.
Anthony Brown did pretty well for the Baltimore Ravens.
Yes.
He was an Oregon quarterback for a year.
Anybody stick out? Yes. Why would you know that about Oregon?
I have no idea. Listen, that's the most intriguing position for this football team right now, because Trevor Harris is 38, or if you watched AJ do a weather forecast on CTV Morning Live a couple days ago, he said that he was born in 1907. So I still haven't heard if there's payback for that. But it's going to get people talking. You need to talk about the quarterback position, and this seems to take some steps to maybe address that, because you're still a few years away, if at all, from Curtis Rourke.
Well, I think what the commissioner is trying to do here in opening up this information for the public fully, before they, I think, a couple of times a year,
8 to 10 players,
10. But what he was, I think, trying to do is show that the quality of football player in the CFL is extremely high. And here's the people on these negotiation lists. Many of them are very, very good football players. It's the second best football league in the world, the entire world.
Sure, they're on the list, but they're not coming here.
No, but some might.
Some are.
Some might.
Right.
So the point being, I think they're showing that, you know what, folks, some of these players are going to come, and they're very good players in the United States.
Sure,
the
but
talent level is high.
It's not likely to be quarterback Trey Lance immediately or Chase Claypool immediately. Those are going to be guys that still want to play football.
Yeah, I mean, Claypool's still with the Bills, so we'll see. But you never know. I mean, if you take a look at
depends how much they love the game and love the money.
Devon Campbell, the Roughrider Canadian cornerback, who of course had a pick six a week ago.
University of Regina Ram. He was a Cougar track star.
Right, he
held a record for a number of years. I talked to him the other night. He said somebody finally broke it, and it was okay because he went to the Olympics.
My son raced against him, but he didn't win.
No.
Anyway, but if you take a look at Campbell in track, if you take a look at Campbell, though, he doesn't need the money.
No.
I mean, he made lots of money. What was it, 6 years in the NFL?
We all need a little bit of money, right?
Yeah. What was it, 6 years he was in the NFL, I believe?
A couple of stops, yeah.
He's playing for the love of the game. He's playing because he likes the idea of playing in Saskatchewan, and Jeremy O'Day, talked him into it, and as did the head coach, Corey Mace. And so you never know who's willing to play football that's already got a heavy wallet. Some know. Probably more than half, well over half, probably won't play because they're so wealthy. They're not going to come up here. But there's the odd one that will come up. And, of course, a lot of the names that you're going to see in these negotiation lists are college stars, major college stars, who many of them aren't going to play in the NFL, and they're going to come up here, and they've got a unique body.
They want to come and earn their shot back, right? Some want to work their way back. Yeah.
What's that?
Some want to work their way back, get that opportunity, put some tape football's such a unique sport, and John Ryan and I talk about this all the time. When I finished playing hockey, I can go on and I can play men's league or I can play senior hockey for as long as I want. The minute you step off the field in football, you're done. Like there might be flag football in your future, but you're never playing in the trenches the same way that you did in high school, college, or professional if you get that opportunity. It's a unique sport.
Right. Daryl Rummold of CTV Morning Live joins us on the Sports Cage, and we'll be back with more Cage in just a moment. Cage brought to you by Regina Motor Products. Don Hewitt along here with CTV Morning Live's Daryl Rummold. And sorry I screwed up the end of the weather, Curtis. You had to cut me off. But I'll try to do better tomorrow. And I'll reintroduce, I think I'm reintroducing Keith Willoughby, the Dean of the Edwards School of Business up at the University of Saskatchewan. Keith is the foremost CFL analytics expert in Canada because he travels to the States. He knows more about analytics than anybody I know that's just working outside of a professional sports team, because they obviously have people that study analytics. And are you an analytics fan there, Daryl?
I was waiting for you to give me the weather. Look at this guy. He's overdressed. He's making I got a 1990 Shania Twain tour shirt on. And she's coming here July 7th.
In Moose Jaw.
Yeah, you're in a hoodie and.
Well, unlike you and me, Keith has some class.
He understands numbers too.
Yes, he does.
We're probably taking him away from a class at the U of S, which is my wife's alma mater. So
yes.
Shout out to the U of S Huskies.
Who did she play for? What sport?
She didn't play a sport. She's an ecologist. She's got a master's in something that I can't pronounce.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm the smart one, just for the record, just so everybody. Yes.
You're the smart one?
Right. Yes. Well, I married her. That makes me pretty smart.
Maybe you're smart because you married her. That's about the only way you're smart. Okay. We know Keith Willoughby is very smart. That's for sure. Now, Keith, a lot of interesting things going on in the CFL to start with. One of them is, unlike last year, there doesn't seem to be any close games. It seems to be some teams dominating and other teams doing quite the reverse. We're missing those close games right now, Keith.
Absolutely, and great to have you on the show, Don and Daryl. So,
yep.
Pleasure to be in your presence here. Enjoy the opportunity. Yeah, this year's season is really interesting to compare it to what we saw last year. We've had 16 games so far in the league thus far. Only three of those 16 games have been one possession games in which the margin of victory was within 8 points or fewer. Interestingly enough, all three of those games involved the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
Yeah.
It was the initial win against Ottawa, the win again in Hamilton, and then Mario's run to glory in the game in Toronto. We have had zero games that have been within a field goal. Even last year, 7 of the first 16 were within 3 points. And this year, again, we seem to be really aching for that down to the wire, go into overtime, last second walk-off field goal. So we'll see if we can turn it around. But thus far during this early part of the season, a lot of one-sided games thus far in 2025.
Keith, where's your love of numbers come from, and what do you say to the people out there, and they do exist, that don't believe in analytics? They say it's a passion, it's a feel for the game thing.
I think my passion comes from the fact that all my life, my earliest dream was to be quarterback for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Genetics were not very kind to me. So in my family, just a bit of a name drop here. So my cousins, Caitlin and Morgan Willoughby, played for the University of Saskatchewan women's Husky hockey team. In fact, Caitlin right now plays in the Professional Women's Hockey League with Toronto.
Wow.
So all of the Willoughbys who are on the family farm emerged as athletic geniuses, and Dad, who moved to Melfort, Saskatchewan, our family became, not athletically gifted. So I think it's always been a desire that I love sports, and numbers are...
Technology's great when it works. He's coming back to us, folks. Don't worry. In the meantime, Don. Don, that's really impressive resume.
We can get
and he's found his way, and he's one of those number of people throughout the world that have found their way into sports. right? If you talk to Rich Sutter of the famous Sutter family, he says the smart one is in his family is Gary, who didn't play in the NHL. He's the seventh Sutter. He won $1 million in the lottery, invested it, and he's doing better than all of them. He says no aches, no pains, nothing.
Wow, as if the Sutters needed more money than they've already got. So we're going to listen to Curtis here. He's going to try to reconnect with Keith Willoughby. And it's interesting about analytics, though. The general manager of the Carolina Hurricanes, that's all he really does is analytics to select players, who to sign, who to draft. He's like mainly analytics and much less the human touch or the human observation.
Well, where do you stand on that? Because this all got thrust into the limelight when Brad Pitt starred in the movie Moneyball, right? And that is a famous story about the Oakland Athletics, who took a whole different approach to how they were doing recruiting, taking players that were undervalued, underutilized in different positions, and putting them in places that analytics told them should lead to success. They didn't win, Don. So there is an element still that exists where the manager, if it's baseball, or the coach, if it's hockey, does have to feel the game. So where do you stand?
I agree. Well, I would agree with what you're saying. I think you need analytics. I think it's now an important part of the game, and it's so complex now. Like if you take a look at analytics in the NHL, and all the different categories. Keith could talk more about this much better than I can, and hopefully Keith will be with us in a moment. Keith Willoughby, the head analytics sports expert in Canada. But I think exactly what you say. You still need a lot of other factors to determine what a hockey player is all about. And like you said, one of them would be effort. One of them would be character, how they do in pressure. So there's a lot of different elements that don't have too much to do with analytics, but I think you do need analytics, I believe, nowadays to win.
I think needed, but how do you stop from
you can't really, like I say, there's the ability to score a goal. You can't
physically.
Well,
you can and you
can't. We'd have to ask Keith, but Keith's coming. Curtis is working on Keith, but.
Sounds like Keith is back with us. Keith, the point that Don and I were just making here on the radio on 620 CKRM here is how do you approach the game and not get paralyzed by the numbers?
That's an excellent question, Daryl. Again, I don't know where I was when I think we lost the connection temporarily there. Analytics will help to support a decision, but never make a decision. So to me, you use analytics as a piece of evidence because there are things analytics will not do. Analytics doesn't know the culture of the team. Analytics that has limited ways at trying to really track real-time momentum in terms of what's happening in the field of play. So I always view analytics as being that support. If you look, and I'm not trying to criticize, again, I'm an analytics guy. Maybe it sounds like I'm trying to criticize it. But if you look, analytical models suggest that teams should more often than not go for it on third down in the CFL or fourth down in the NFL. I think any real coach, if you're 3rd and 2 on your own 20-yard line, okay, and I love Tommy Stevens, but I think it would take a lot for a coach to put Tommy Stevens out in that play because if you don't make it, the other team has great field position and your coach loses a job. So I think that's where analytics to me is a bit of the, again, it's the support, but it's not to replace human decision making because there are things that analytics will not pick up. What analytics will pick up, though, are tendencies. It'll pick up, obviously, recurring elements that might really be important. And it gives, again, that broader, deeper perspective for the action that we see on the field or the court or the ice surface.
Head coach Corey Mace calls Tommy Stephen D-line because he just runs out there, runs over people. It's interesting that you make that point, Keith, because the voice of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Derek Taylor, has been beating this drum for years. On 3rd and 1, go for it. Why not? You got all that field to work with. Why not? And if you've got a guy that can run, then if the numbers are there to support it, let's do it.
Well, Tommy Stevens is one of the best signings that I think Jeremy O'Day had during the offseason amongst quite a few of them, really. Just automatic, except once he got stopped there last week, but generally he's an automatic. And getting back to your computer models, Keith, if we can, I know it's early in the season yet. There's just patterns starting to develop now, but how does your computer model, what does your computer model think of the Saskatchewan Roughriders?
Sadly, I'm about to give the kiss of death for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. So I apologize to the thousands of members of Rider Nation who are listening with bated breath to the next few seconds of my comments about analytics. The model loves the Riders. It loves the Riders thus far. Hey, we're 4-0. The last victory was a convincing 19-point win over British Columbia. British Columbia, who played Winnipeg twice and played them close. BC, who beat Edmonton. So right now, it's making the Saskatchewan Roughriders the odds-on favorite to sip champagne for the 5th time in franchise history.
Wow.
A 48% chance the Riders will emerge victorious, that we will invade Winnipeg on the 3rd Sunday in November and defeat Montreal. Again, that's what the computer model is predicting. A 48% chance that we end up winning the Grey Cup this year.
See, Daryl, that is great analytics.
Yeah, but to his point, right? To his point, it can't predict certain things. Like you're talking about a BC Lions team that didn't play with Nathan Rourke, right? Things change.
Well, after
things
what
change.
Keith just said,
I want to temper expectations.
I'm buying in 100% on what Keith just said.
I want to temper expectations because I don't want people burning down.
That I'm not trying to jinx the Riders, but I've been doing this for a decade. So it began in 2014 as sort of a nice side project. The CFL website began posting it on their website as sort of just a chance for people to follow along with analytics and how was your team being predicted to do. This went live the week before Darian got hurt in the Banjo Bowl in Winnipeg, which basically catapulted the 2014 season and put us into like a 2.5-year slide into oblivion. So, again, I trust things will be better this time. I don't want to jinx the Riders. But the years that I've been doing this model, I typically measure the Riders' percentage in 0.1 or 0.2%. It's nice to see it now have a reasonably strong likelihood that, again, we cannot deny we're 4-0. Having said that, again, the computer model has seen a very slim section of the season thus far. There's 17 more weeks to be played in the regular season. We still have to go twice to Winnipeg, and winning in Manitoba is hard. We still have 2 games with Montreal. So again, thus far, so good. So far, so good. Let's see what happens as the computer model continues to generate these wild predictions.
And Don, you got to stay healthy throughout the course of all
absolutely.
that, right?
That's right. I can't predict that though. So in terms of the current weird lack of parity in the CFL, Keith, what are the numbers showing you as to how lopsided it is between the teams?
Well, basically right now the computer model has you can think of it like looking through a three-sided triangle or something. You've got Winnipeg, Montreal, and Saskatchewan, and then the rest of the schmoes later on in the league. Right now you've got Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Montreal that are a combined 10-1. And then you've got the 4 bottom feeders, which is BC, Ottawa, Toronto, and Edmonton, which are 1-12. So you've got this really wide disparity, which is another reason why the model is so bullish on the Riders. It's because right now it's viewing Montreal, Winnipeg, and Saskatchewan as the only legit teams that right now have a chance at winning the Grey Cup in November. Again, I know a lot's going to change. We'll get hopefully more parity as teams play each other. Especially when we play Winnipeg plays Montreal. Right now, I can't think back in a previous year when we've had such disparity. Usually we've got, the West is much better than the East, but this year we've got, again, 3 really, really good teams. I'd say Calgary, Hamilton in the middle, and then 4 teams that are just really tanking early. And we're just basically not even just past Canada Day, 1 day past Canada Day. We're already seeing this wide separation between first and worst.
What in the numbers surprises you the most?
That the Riders are going to go 14-4.
Oh wow! That's a heck of a record.
Which in my, again, I was a young child watching Sesame Street when the Riders went 14-2 in 1970, and then Larry Robinson, of course, curtailed our chance of going to the Grey Cup. I saw us go 13-5 in 2019 in Craig Dickinson's first year as boss of the Riders, but double-digit win seasons are rare for the Riders. So 14-4 would be into that area that we have not seen in forever in the green and white.
So, Saskatchewan hasn't beaten a team with a winning record, but neither has Winnipeg in Montreal. Is that correct, Keith?
Yeah. Every game, no team with a winning record has beaten another team with a winning record. It's the way the schedule has emerged thus far, where Winnipeg has defeated BC twice. Winnipeg has defeated Edmonton once. Montreal, thinking of their schedule, I know they defeated Toronto, they defeated Ottawa, they defeated Edmonton. So just with the way the games have lined up thus far, it's been like your really, really strong teams playing against the really weak teams, and that's contributing to the wide gap we see in terms of differences in number of wins amongst the 9 CFL teams.
Yeah, and so, when you think about, what Saskatchewan is doing with the computer model, you wonder what would happen if they hadn't had all the injuries that they've had. I mean, to do that well in the computer model and have all the players, and some of them star players, out of the lineup is quite impressive.
And that's getting back to the earlier point, Professor and Daryl, you were talking about what the computer model will not look at, or what analytics won't look at. Analytics doesn't look at the fact that the Riders have lost nearly 40% of their starting Canadians that they had at the beginning of the year. McEwen, pencil into center, he's gone. KSB, gone for a while. MLS, sort of data game to game. When you lose starting Canadians, that's a real challenge, because good Canadians don't grow on trees. So the ability to have Daniel Johnson put in as left tackle and doing reasonably well, has a second-year CFL player. To have Jamarcus Hardrick, who's 3 million years old. Here's an interesting stat, Daryl and Professor. The Riders have never lost a game in which Jamarcus Hardrick has started and finished. So, put that in your radar. So something when Jamarcus is playing right tackle, the Riders are doing well. I don't like the fact that he picks up our players in celebratory fashion.
Yeah,
I feel he's going to bear hug squeeze Ouellette or Harris or something. But again, there are good things happening with role players. Del Duncan Busby, again, coming in and making some key catches. We've had 3 different players go over 100 yards in the first 3 games. Having said that, again, maybe what analytics will say is that if you can run the ball, you're going to do really, really well. And you think back to these 4 games we've had, whether it's Kadeem Carey, whether it's TBH, whether it's Thor, even Tommy 2-Yard Stevens out there. We've got quarterbacks, we've got running backs and quarterbacks that are moving the ball. When was the last time you saw a CFL team go on an 8-minute drive? That happens maybe in the NFL. But the Riders began the second half against BC.
Great point.
You were unadulterated. I'm going to run the ball down your throat. And BC couldn't stop us. If the Riders can maintain that for this season, folks, I think that, to me, will be the secret to the Riders emerging victorious with the Grey Cup.
It's hilarious that you say that Tommy Stevens, 2-yard Tommy, because we were joking in the press box at the last game that Tommy Stevens was now averaging more per carry than Trent Richardson did in his brief stint with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Because we used to sit in the box and they'd hand off to 33 and the announcer, Trent Richardson up the middle for 3.3 yards every single time. To the point where he would pick up the ball and I'd say 3.3, boom, 3.3.
Well, to Keith's point.
Tommy's unreal.
Well, to Keith's point about Tommy Stevens and Hardrick, have you noticed how many times that he runs right on the quarterback sneaks? The only time he ran left, he got stuffed. Every other time he's going right. Well, once he went down the middle, Keith, but every other time he went over Hardrick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think back, Stevens was the player I love to hate. He played with Calgary because he had runs. Remember, he had the 85-yard run. He had a 69-yard run. And how was this guy doing it? Well, now I see. He is obviously he's big, but he's athletic, and the legs keep on pumping. Yes. So it's, to me, it's hard to stop him. I'm young enough to have seen George Reed play at the end of his career. But when I see the running game right now, and I know the CFL, we're a pass-oriented league, but when you can run the ball, you see what Winnipeg has done over the past 5 years with Andrew Harris and Brady Oliveira. They are moving the change, they're controlling the clock, and they're sucking the air out of the other team by what they're doing. We're seeing that right now with the green and white.
Well, it's interesting. Off the snap, if you watch Tommy Stevens carefully, he's very quick to make his move, like very quick. I mean, he's not just making these moves because he's 245. He's quick. He's a lot quicker than people realize for his size.
Absolutely, and I think that's been a positive benefit. And even I'll throw out Thomas Bertrand-Hudon, which I think for a lot of us for the last couple of years, he was sort of that the token Canadian. I'm not trying to be disparaging about him.
Yeah.
But to see what Hudon has done, like he makes people miss, and he's doing something with the ball. So to me, there's an abundance of riches, because one of these days when MLS gets back in the lineup, I think we're going to see Kadeem Carey and Thor in the same backfield along with TBH. To me, that's going to be a triple-headed monster in the backfield.
What I'd love to see these models do, and I've been talking to people about this for the last couple of days. The CFL changed the rule a couple of years ago. You can now have two quarterbacks on the field at the same time. Right. Nobody's done it. I really want to see somebody do it to see what that does to the numbers that Keith punches.
That's a good point. Are you surprised that we haven't seen more of that?
Do the numbers not bear that out?
Quarterbacks on the field,
because you get a team like the Roughriders who've got a couple of capable quarterbacks who can throw the ball. Why not take sling it out to number 9 and see if he can go downfield?
Yeah.
Yeah, the model hasn't done that yet, but I think that would be something that you could maybe look at more in sort of the impact of a particular play or a player. I think back years ago in 2018 in Nick Marshall's first year, Nick Marshall, who had the great quarterback career when he was with Auburn.
I begged for them to let him play. When they had all those quarterback injuries, I thought, oh, come on, just let him go.
Just let Nick have a ball, because Nick, he knows how to throw it. He knows how to run. He's smaller in frame than Tommy 2-Yard, but he can still really move the ball when he was in the field.
That was
Keith,
when we went through
that big fire today.
That's when we went through that big stretch where Seth Daggy played quarterback for 2 games, and this guy played for 2 games, and that guy played for 2 games. Yeah. I was like, just throw Nick in there.
Well, it's nice. Go ahead, Keith.
Sorry, Professor. Just going to say it's nice being a Rider fan for the past. I've been going to games since the early '70s as a young boy from Melfort. But I sat through the Mitch Gale era. I sat through Tino So Sorry. I
sorry.
Seth Daggy.
That's good.
I'm all about Seth Daggy. Snaps for snaps. He is an offensive coordinator at one of the big NCAA Division I schools now. I still talk to him.
And I know that Jake Mayer, he wasn't the second coming of Kent Austin in Saturday's game, but to me, there's some background. At least we have somebody competent as a backup, because gone are the days when QB1 is going to play 18 games in a season.
That's a
might very well be.
I haven't marked exams like Keith has, but I'm going to give Keith, for this last segment, a definite 10 out of 10.
No, you got to give him an A- so that he wants to come back and upgrade his grade. Right? You guess you want to.
I don't know.
Give him something to work towards, Don.
He was on fire today. Thanks a lot.
He's our professor.
Yeah, he's the real professor. Thanks a lot, Keith. We really appreciate it.
No worries.
And we'll see you shortly at some point. You bet. Sports Cage will continue in just a moment. Well, our clutch performer, I'm going to go with Rider running back AJ Ouellette for going 139 yards. That was his career best the other night against the BC Lions. Now, Curtis, do you have any clutch performers you can think about?
Geez, Don, put me on the spot here. I'll say you for coming in and filling it in. Barney's gone here. It's like clutch.
You know who was clutch? Really wasn't me. It was Daryl Rummel. He was clutch. He just came in and lit it up. I just watched him before him, really. So, but thanks anyway for saying that. And we know that Clutch Performance is brought to you by Nick's Service in Emerald Park, your local Massey, Ferguson, Challenger, Rogator, Gleaner, and Fent dealer. Call the good folks at Nick's Service. I go by there all the time when I go golfing out there at Emerald Park. Call 306-781-1077. And now, up next on Sports Cage, as promised, I think he's the most talented sports reporter, journalist, opinion maker, certainly in Toronto, one of the best in Canada, Arash Madani. And one of the reasons I say that about Arash is because Arash Madani is never boring. you do see talking heads sometimes.
It's time to go coast to coast with Arash Madani for Smart Investing Solutions. Be smart with your money. Call Brian Gawley at Smart Investing Solutions, 546-2533.
I think you got my point. Curtis said to run. The client absolutely rules, and he had to run that because he pays Arash's bills. And the bills for this radio station. But you got my point about Arash. He's a super talent. And there's so many talking heads in sports that make you fall asleep. Arash is not one of them. Anyway, Arash, welcome back to SportsCage. And we got a ton to talk about. And you wonder where to start. I guess Mitch Marner, almost $100 million, Arash, for an outstanding superstar in the NHL regular season and pretty mediocre player in the playoffs, gets almost $100 million. How do you think that's going to work in Vegas, and how are the Leafs going to do without him?
I think it's one of the most fascinating, kind of turnabouts, that here you have Mitch Marner, who is from these parts, who wore number 93 in junior in London because his father's favorite player was Doug Gilmour with the Leafs, who had the city in the palm of his hands, a market that just wanted to embrace him so much that Marner talked about wanting to win here for so long. And it goes from that to somehow this whole thing became spoiled over the last 2-3 years to the point where it became very evident that Mitch Marner was not going to re-sign with the Maple Leafs, that Mitch Marner did not want to stay in the city where he met his wife and had a child and grew up in, and wants to be, 5 hours away in the desert of Las Vegas. That was his destination from the jump. And I think if we're being real with one another, there was probably some tampering going on along the way for Marner to end up there. And he goes from one of the most hockey-mad markets, one of the most sports-mad markets, to a place where, there's going to be very little pressure, very little kind of quote-unquote negative attention there with the Golden Knights. I find, this is a guy who easily could have had a statue, could have had his jersey retired, could have had all those things if he stayed here in Toronto, but orchestrated his exit by doing what he's done over the last couple of years.
Vegas is an interesting team because they go for these veterans, good players, obviously. Just getting the news that Peter Angelo's likely done with his career there because of some bad hips. But I don't see them ever developing younger players and drafting and getting draft picks and drafting well. And it's all of these good old veterans. I don't know if you win a Stanley Cup that way, or do you disagree with that?
Well, they have. I guess that's the point here. That's the rub, is that Vegas has. So it's an interesting quote-unquote model, Don, that they've gone with, is that they have an owner who is willing to spend cash way over the cap and put these vets on long-term injured reserve and then add them either towards the end of the regular season or, when the playoffs start, when the cap doesn't hit. Look, good ownership wins. And maybe you don't necessarily need to draft and develop. Look, I think if you're a market like Vegas, you cannot have a rebuild and expect people to be patient and continue to come to the arena. There are a lot of other options for your entertainment dollar in Las Vegas. So, I just don't, I think the owner realizes this is the way we got to go about it.
Yeah, I guess you're right. They have done it. I just don't know how sustainable it's going to be. But is it a point now, without a few younger players that you're developing yourself, is what I mean, is what Montreal is trying to do. But is it becoming a league, Arash, where the richest owners are going to just win? Maybe they don't have to pay tax in their state, or they can buy out contracts. Like at some point, Brad Marchand He's got a contract to the age of 43. He's not going to finish that. They're going to buy him out. Is it going to be the richer owner's going to win? Because that's going to stink like Major League Baseball does in that respect.
Maybe, except on the richest owners, I would dare suggest, are here in Toronto. And how's that worked out for them?
And that just changed today, or Rogers just got it today.
Another top owner, the New York Rangers. They haven't won since 1994. Look, I get what Florida's doing. I think then what happens with owners is once you win, there's nothing like it. It's a disease. It is it is addictive. Once you taste it, once you lift that trophy over your head, you just want more and more of it. And it doesn't matter which one it is. You know, the Argos lifting Grey Cup trophies, Larry Tannenbaum, who for now is still one of the owners of MLSE, he liked that a lot. He liked when Toronto FC lifted it. They all liked it when the Raptors did.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, once you win, the owners are like, all right, let's keep this thing going. Unless you're the Florida Marlins, but that's a different story for a different day.
Well, Keith Pelly's the big man in Toronto sports now, of course, is the head honcho of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, and you wonder when the Blue Jay umbrella will come under even Keith Pelly at some point. I don't know if it will or not, but it's interesting because he's been getting rid of presidents lately and not replacing them except for Masai Ujiri. And he said it's because they're going to bring in a president. The NBA is more complex than the other sports. What did you think of that comment?
Well, I think I told Barney months ago to expect when Bill Manning was sent out and Manning was overseeing as president TFC and the Argos, I said, this is just the beginning. And then came Brendan Shanahan and then came Masai Ujiri. I don't know, Don. It wouldn't shock me if Bobby Webster, who now just got a contract extension as GM, they'll say, yeah, we did a search, but Bobby knows our organization. He knows the market. He knows the league. He's well respected. He works in a big office. It wouldn't surprise me if that happens. Where it's gotten now interesting is the full reset is underway with new ownership. You know, Rogers officially today became the majority owner of MLSE. So what does that mean? Well, it means that there is no longer a board of directors, you know, like the Riders have.
Yep.
It is one owner, one central owner in Ed Rogers. And immediately you're seeing, you know, it began with the presidents going out. Then Toronto FC, their two top paid players, these two Italian guys, they got bought out. It's an entirely different deal now. And I just think you're going to see real influence from ownership on these teams, for better, for worse, good, bad, indifferent. It's going to be a different way of going about business. And it's going to be really interesting to watch how much they're going to spend on the soccer side, how much they're going to spend on the football side, et cetera, et cetera.
Now, Keith Pelly, according to what he said when he asked Masai Ujiri, was that they had decided that Masai Ujiri would do the draft, and then at that point he was going to he got fired, basically. He was going to be leaving after the draft. So you would think by that, Arash, that he was calling the shots at the draft, which was such an absurd draft for the Raptors, not picking a 5 or a center, whatever you want to call the big men. We see Jakob Poeltl getting a new deal just, I think, yesterday, but he's got nobody to back him up, and they couldn't win a basketball game last year whenever Jakob was injured, and they don't pick a center. Instead, they pick the exact same type of athlete that they've already got. And I thought that is the most muddled up, bizarre draft, and they could have had a couple of the big guys from Duke and Maryland that were right there for them. And in fact, I think the Duke guy went next. How do you explain that goofy draft the Raptors had? Because they didn't draft for what they needed.
It feels like for a while, Don, that the Raptors have been on the long road to nowhere. And then, Ujiri and company were really trying to push the rebuild narrative and the patience narrative and stick with us. And then they short-circuited last year with the trade, bringing in Brandon Ingram, etc. So now they're not at the point where they could fully tank. They didn't get any luck in the lottery on top of that. This was an opportunity for a generational player. And so now, look, you have to give the caveat, you have to give the boilerplate. The Raptors won a championship in 2019. First time ever. It was a major event. It united Canadians. It gave people belief and all those things. And it's amazing what happened. I covered the finals. I covered the parade. It was an incredible time. Don, that was before the pandemic. We live in a professional sports world of what have you done for me lately? Well, what have the Raptors done since? In 20, in 21, in 22, in 23, in 24, in 25.
Yeah, that's right.
6 years and one playoff series win. They're not even getting back to the postseason anymore. And there was just this hanging on. Well, Masai said we're going to win again here, so we got to believe him because it happened once before a long time ago. I haven't understood the draft strategies, plural. Not just this year, but over the last few years, and it's kind of been par for the course for a little while now.
Well, and the way they left, or Masai left the roster in terms of free agency, trying to get a center. I just saw Ayton signed a deal just today, leaving Portland. But
with the Lakers.
To the Lakers, exactly. But, you know, I mean, Webster had no money anyway to try to get a center in free agency because they don't have any money right now with what their salary structure is right now. I want to go back to Webster, though. Apparently, Webster, Spicy P, of course, Siakam, Pascal Siakam, they didn't want to give him the max contract, or I should say, Ujiri didn't want to give him the max contract, but Webster was apparently of another thought, and of course, Siakam goes to the NBA Finals. So, is he going to be quite different if he stays in power for any length of time? Is Webster going to be quite different, do you think, than Masai Ujiri?
I think there'll be some differences and changes and different philosophies. Look, everybody's got a boss, no matter what your job is. Whoever's listening or watching the stream right now, how many times have you thought to yourself, man, I see what's happening here. If I were in charge, I may go about it this way. Wait till they give me the keys to this business, to this organization, to this farm, to this building, to whatever it is we're doing here. I think Bobby Webster's in the same spot. Here's somebody who came up in the league office. Here's somebody who's been the number 2 behind Masai for a while. He's seen what's worked. He's seen what hasn't worked. He probably has his own philosophies on how to go about it and just hasn't had final say. Now he holds the keys. So I think you're going to see a little bit of what you saw before. I think you're going to see a little bit of brand new philosophies and a little bit of put both in the blender and see where it takes you.
Yeah.
But for a long time, Bobby Webster's said, I wonder what happens if I'm in charge. Well, now he's in charge, Don.
Yep. Looks like it. It looks like Keith Pelly's making nice comments and he got an extension of his contract. Now let's get to the CFL. I really didn't expect Brady Oliveira to be back as soon as he is after that shoulder injury, I believe the first game of the season, but he's playing tomorrow night in Calgary. So what do you think of all that sort of thing? Because the Bombers are doing pretty well without him.
Yeah, and I think this is showing a lot of respect for Brady Oliveira because Oliveira wants to play. And the fact that he was able to practice all week, suggests that there's a green light. I'm assuming, I don't know what his pitch count is going to be, but I don't expect him to get the full load of carries. Will they spell him off for series? Will they have specific packages for the young Canadian who's been starting in his spot? Probably. But look, Brady Oliveira is, along with Zach Collaros, the face of this franchise. And so, I'm all for sit the guy. He's got nothing to prove. Give him another week, et cetera, protect the player from themselves. But if he thinks he can go, and maybe this is a way of, giving him 50, 60, 65% of the reps as a kind of ramp up. Maybe that's kind of the philosophy going into this Calgary game. But the Bombers have gotten healthy across the board. And I just think that this is kind of tailor-made for a Winnipeg win tomorrow night.
Yeah, well, here in Saskatchewan, we keep waiting and waiting and waiting, Arash, for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to be lousy. They lose 8 players to the Hamilton Tiger Cats over the off-season, and you think, finally, and their quarterback's getting older. But there's something magic in that city with that football team, and it seems to center around their head coach, Mike O'Shea, does it not?
I think O'Shea's a big part of it. I think Collaros is a big part of it. He's somebody who is a very even-keeled demeanor, but he can turn it up when it matters. I think Willie Jefferson brings the fire and brimstone. I think you have a veteran offensive line. I think that matters a lot. And you have a couple of Hall of Famers up front. It's a big part of it. There's been some change, but there's been a lot of continuity there, Don. And in a business of a lot of change, the fact that you can have kind of, pillars on your team, the Neufeld, the Stanley Bryants, the Nick Dembskis, the Zach Collaroses, it's Olivero taking the torch from Andrew Harris, on and on we can go. I think that's a big part of roster construction and culture building that's been able to withstand all of this and I think this is important too, Don, withstand a number, it's now plural, of Grey Cup losses. It's easy for things to kind of spin away, and they haven't. And I think there's something to be said for that.
That is an outstanding point. That's right. They just keep rolling. Now, for me, I haven't been overly enthused in the last number of years about Saskatchewan's chances against Winnipeg, particularly in Winnipeg. Now, the Roughriders have a lot of injuries at the moment, but this year, my question is this the year, though, that Saskatchewan can knock Winnipeg off? What do you think?
No, I don't know. It's July 2nd, Don.
Yeah, I know.
November is 4 months away. There's so much that can happen over the course of a football season. What does the roster look like then compared to the roster now with injuries and the rest? I always say it's not the best team that wins. It's often the healthiest.
That's right.
And there in Winnipeg, they probably wonder what happens if Zach Collaros doesn't cut open his finger last year in the Grey Cup.
Exactly.
What could it, So it's so hard to kind of forecast what'll happen. But I will tell you this. Something tells me that the Riders are going to win Labor Day and the Bombers are going to win the Banjo Bowl. Because it just seems there's something karmic out there when it comes to those 2 weeks.
It is. And then they play a third time as well later in the season. Now, the Hamilton Tiger Cats, they looked pretty good, I thought, last week. Do you see this team maybe building a little momentum after what I thought was a pretty good victory?
It was a good win. It was a needed win. You get a rookie in there, a middle linebacker with a pick six and making plays for you. Bo looked comfortable for the first time in a while. But I think we just have to pause a little bit on this Ticats thing because we saw why McLeod Bethel Thompson was expendable this offseason. That's not the same Alouettes team. It's one thing if Davis Alexander's in there. It's a different thing if he's not. Now, what I liked about Hamilton was their foot was on the accelerator. They had the gadget play with the fake punt. They were able to take advantage of the turnovers. They executed at a high level, which they hadn't done in a while. We'll see against Toronto. Look, there's still no Chad Kelly again. It's a short week for the Argos, but I obviously was needed for the Tiger Cats. I'm just not sure how much, Don, we actually learned about Hamilton. I think we learned more about Montreal and how important Davis Alexander is to that football team.
Is Davis Alexander, is he the new face, if you will, of the CFL?
He's the new hope. He's the next young hope that this league has. And I want to be careful the way I say this. I think we're still waiting to see what Nathan Rourke can be. Because what Nathan Rourke was pre-NFL and what Nathan Rourke has shown to be post-NFL almost feel like two different people, two different players. You know, we don't know what Drew Brown is in Ottawa. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. That offensive line's a mess, et cetera, et cetera. Look, I think if you're looking at one young, quote-unquote, face, one young quarterback, one young hope, to me it is, I agree with you. It's Davis Alexander. I put him ahead of Trey Ford. I put him ahead of... Right now, I even put him ahead of Rourke just because Rourke hasn't been able to stay healthy enough to show over a sustained period of time since coming back from the NFL what he can be and what he is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, is there hope for Trey Ford? I mean, he's an outstanding athlete, but when he has to stay in the pocket, when he's back reading a defense, it looks like hesitation to me. But do you think that he's still going to be the man to lead the Elks, or what's your take on him at this exact moment of time?
So I think we need to remember that Trey Ford is in a situation where the Elks were so bad last year that they changed their general manager, they changed their head coach, and they basically rehauled their roster. Mm-hmm. It's not Folgers. It's not instant coffee. You can't snap your fingers and make things happen. I don't know how good the Elks are overall. Mm-hmm. I want to see more imagination in that entire offense. I want to see a little more than the traditional things that we've been seeing from the Elks, more pre-snap motion, get some guys into space, et cetera, et cetera. I think that would help Edmonton a lot, but I just don't know if this is a full referendum on Trey Ford. Like if Jake Mayer, if Vernon Adams, if Bo, if they were all starting for Edmonton this week, what would that offense be? So, some of it is on Ford. There's no question, etc. But also, let's remember what the Edmonton Elks are and what they've been and why they're in this spot to begin with.
Yeah, that's a good point. Arash Madani, one of the most talented sports reporters that I've ever listened to, and he just proved it in this last half hour. Thanks for joining us again on SportsCage. I think you're up tomorrow, I think so.
We'll do it again tomorrow.
We'll talk about maybe the Blue Jays. They appear to be better than people realize, but we'll find out.
They're hot.
Thanks. They're hot. Thanks for joining us, Arash. SportsCage continues in just a moment. And let's go over the schedule tonight in the Western Canadian Baseball League. The Regina Red Sox are at Mitchell Field in Swift Current to take on the 57s. Meanwhile, the Moose Jaw Miller Express also on the road in Saskatoon to take on the Berries. That's one of the best names in sports. The Saskatoon Berries all started by Wild Bill Hunter when he wanted to bring the NHL, and rightfully should have, to Saskatoon. And the man that's going to be coming up next, Brendan McGuire, knows much more about that story than I did. He did an incredible documentary on that story. Meanwhile, the Medicine Hat Mavericks are in Sylvan Lake to play the Gulls. And, of course, Al Simpson earlier in the show told us that the Sylvan Lake is sold out every single game with their new stadium. And that's what Al and Sean Semple are hoping to do in the future under the P3 program here in Regina. And the Okotoks Dogs, the class of the league, of course, with their beautiful facility. Calgary spurned Okotoks, or rather they spurned the owners of Okotoks, so they moved to Okotoks. Now they have likely the most successful franchise in the league. They are in Brooks to play the Brooks Bombers. Anyway, the tickers brought to you by Extreme Hockey and Sport. Whatever your spring sport is, Extreme Hockey has you covered. And we're back with SportsCage, brought to you by Regina Motor Products. It's Don Hewitt filling in for Barney, who is on a family vacation and working on his golf game. And he says very successfully so, apparently. I don't know. Anyway, we had Daryl Rummold in from CTV Morning Live. He was here for, I think, the first hour and a half. Then he vacated because he's got a lot of things to do that his wife needs done while she's away. So he leaves, and boy, are we lucky, because guess who comes in now is the voice of the University of Regina Rams, none other than Brendan McGuire. Of course, he also writes for 3 Down Nation. He's also the host of the Access show In the Huddle. And there's 2 individuals in this community who I would call the top sports encyclopedias, just because of the depth of their sports brains. And not necessarily in this order. They would be Rob Van Stone and Brendan McGuire. Would you agree with that, Curtis, our technical producer?
Sure. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Brendan.
Well, I think if I guess we would qualify for that if we're talking about useless information. It's not actually anything good for anything. We could sit there for 2 hours during rider practice talking about the most random Winnipeg Jet and Montreal Expo trivia, and it's done absolutely nothing for either one of us. But one day he was wearing old gear. I think it was Lee Jones came up to him at practice, and he said...
Rob, you mean, of course.
Yeah, about Rob. And Rob's wearing his Winnipeg Jets gear. And this is well during that period where there were no Winnipeg Jets. And he says, can't you, talk about or have something from the now? And he said, do you just live in the past? And Rob says, it's all I've got.
Well, I guess another thing that he needs, apparently, because he's going to be on the show tomorrow off the top, but another thing that Rob desperately needs is a new car. And that's what he's doing right now with his wife, Ursula. He's looking for new cars. His car it was at the end of the day, and he's punting, as he said, he's punting his old car.
Good for him.
So he's very hectic. He said he can only come on for 15 minutes tomorrow off the top, but it will milk him.
Sounds like Rob's
get him to go longer.
Sounds like Rob's really stressed about this car buying.
Well, yeah, well, who isn't? I mean,
especially
if
today.
You have to buy a new car.
Especially in this world, yeah.
What's this tariff and what's that tariff is basically what it is.
Changes every 5 minutes.
Yeah. So earlier, just a little bit before you arrived here, Brendan, Arash Madani was talking about Trey Ford, quarterback for the Edmonton Elks. And, he was sort of saying he's not really sure about Trey Ford because he doesn't know really what's around Trey Ford with the Elks at the moment. What is your take on Trey Ford? Because at the moment, you could say he's struggling.
Yeah, Suit said it right on the TSN broadcast. He said at some point, he's going to have to throw the team on his back and win a game, and then that will restore the patience and he'll get a little more rope to work with. I think that's accurate. Whether the weapons around him are good enough, I think that's an open question. I don't know the answer to that. Clearly they prioritized free agency last year with guys on the offensive side of the football. Plus there was the trade. They traded for Curly Gittins Jr., etc. This year Geno Lewis is gone, and they spent a bunch of money in free agency on the defensive side of the football. So, that's a hard one for me to answer. I will say I've done a bit of a 180 on Trey Ford. I thought coming into the season that he's good for a couple of games and then that's it. We saw that each of the last 2 years when he took over. But we've seen a lot of signs that the players in the room really want this guy under center. There is the fact that he is Canadian. I think that does matter, not just because we want Canadian quarterbacks, but because he's a ratio changer. The BC Lions get to dress 4 American O-linemen when Nathan Rourke is starting. It's a huge difference and opens up so many possibilities elsewhere. But as I've watched him play and when plays break down, it made me hearken back to a discussion I had with the great Bob Obilovich 8 years ago. I found the article I wrote on it. It was in 2017. And people forget that when Doug Flutie arrived in Canada, he was just seen as another guy still, right? Another athlete, high-priced player, whatever. And he struggled that first year. They brought Joe Powpow out of retirement, for crying out loud, because they didn't know that Doug was going to be the answer. Major Harris was getting playing time, and then the other one was Ricky Foggy. We love Ricky Foggy. He had the greatest haircut of any quarterback. Matt Dunnigan said he was the greatest backup quarterback ever, but he was a career backup. And those guys, Flutie was getting benched for those guys. They really didn't know what they had. And it wasn't until they fell to, I think it was 2-8-1, and they cleaned house. They brought in Bob Obilovich, and he said they had him in this conventional drop back passer mode, kind of just what you'd see in American football. That is not what Doug does well. He said that was obvious from the very get-go. Made a bunch of changes. The team goes 4-3 down the stretch. Flutie looks better. Then in the offseason, they completely redo the offense, and the rest is history. Yeah. He sets the pro football passing record for over 600 yards. So I'm seeing these comparisons because a lot of the commentary I'm hearing from CFL people and 3 Down Nation writers, people who actually understand this better than I do, that Jordan Maximic is not a great fit for what you need for a Trey Ford type of passer. He did well with Vernon Adams, but he's still he did well with Rourke when Rourke, and he did well with pre-NFL. Yes, definitely. But I would argue Nathan Rourke is very different from Trey Ford as far as their skill set, and even Vernon Adams to a certain extent. So it makes me wonder, well, if he's not the guy to tailor this offense around Trey Ford, who is? And I ask around the league, well, what about this guy? What about that guy? J.C. Abbott and I had a great discussion about it last night. And the truth is, they don't seem to have a coordinator who does the good old Canadian version that, helped Damon Allen, Condridge Holloway, and the stars of the past be their mobile, spectacular selves. Interesting. And so wow. The big narrative that I'm hearing is that when Mark Trestman took over in Montreal in 2008, he very much had an American system, and that was seen as the prototype. Follow his lead. And Mark Trestman's great, take nothing from him, but he never had any success except when he had Anthony Calvillo or Ricky Ray as his quarterback. I think that Don Hewitt would look like a pretty good offensive mind if he had one of those quarterbacks, right? You didn't see me when I was a quarterback in touch football, or you wouldn't say that. Okay, well, fair enough. But so it makes me wonder: are the Elks really all in on Trey Ford? Are they really giving him what he needs? Because boy, those plays that he makes when the pocket breaks down are spectacular. And I just wonder if they get him out of the pocket a little bit more, if maybe they pull out a victory in Winnipeg. And if you can win in Winnipeg, you can win anywhere. Not only are they arguably the best team in the Canadian Football League right now, they by far and away have the best home field advantage. Like we have the best stadium here in Regina. Trust me, I've done my homework on this. John Hodge and I talked about this for hours. We do have the best stadium. We do. Absolutely. Better and much better than Winnipeg. Yeah. But when it comes to home field advantage, they are number one. It is so noisy in that park. Just home field advantage. At this point. However, the last game, I was very happy to see. Against the BC Lions, I was very happy to see a pretty good crowd and a very boisterous crowd. And I felt that last home game, hey, maybe people don't like coming to ball games in June. I don't know, but Rider Pride was alive in that game against the BC Lions. And it was loud, it was raucous, and it was good to see. And our stadium still gets pretty loud, too. Like the playoff game last year, we've talked a lot about how there were 5,000 empty seats, and how did that happen for the Western semifinal? It was still pretty loud in there for the victory over BC. But Winnipeg's got has the best fan base, but I think Saskatchewan's is going to rebound. Or if they keep playing like they are, it's going to be more interesting this year, the Winnipeg-Saskatchewan games, I think, than in the past number, for sure. You have to think that they're due for a speed bump at some point. I mean, like Winnipeg, they're found. They remind me a lot of. I've been talking about NFL CFL comparisons, so I'll just keep on riding that horse. Baltimore Ravens. For the longest time, their DNA was defense and running the football, right, with Ray Lewis and all these different running backs. It's a good formula. It works especially down there, and since we're becoming more like American football, apparently, it works up here too. It's always worked up here, actually. But but as that foundation has crumbled, it was Big Hill, it was Jefferson, and it was Jeffcoat. That was the foundation for their whole program. So Jeffcoat's retired, Big Hill's gone, he's aged out. Jefferson is actually still surprisingly playing at a pretty high level.
What an athlete.
So even today, he's lost a step, but he's still pretty good. But they've had to change their identity to be more of an offensive juggernaut. But boy, it's amazing how they keep churning out these Canadian running backs. Like to go from Harris to Oliveira and now Peterson. Peterson was a superstar. I'll use the word superstar. I know Ed Hervey doesn't think we have superstar players in Canada. What a dumb thing to say. And then, but he, it doesn't shock me. If there's going to be a star Canadian running back, it would be Peterson. But this is where O'Shea is really earning his whiskers, I would say, his stripes, is that he is flipping the roster and the train just keeps on rolling.
Yeah, I know. That's incredible. But I have a feeling that Corey Mace has the same deal going on with his players that O'Shea has with the Winnipeg players. So it's going to be interesting. I think one thing I thought that's really impressive by the Riders is the emergence of certain players as Canadians. And I'm talking about Daniel Johnson, Thomas Bertrand-Hudon, Devon Campbell, A.J. Allen. A lot of people aren't talking about this, but these are Canadians that have really emerged. Well, Campbell obviously just came this past year. I think even Nelson Lacombo is playing better at safety. He's more confident. He's moving up at times, confident to read what's going on in front of him. That seems to be a key, particularly Daniel Johnson, to be a starting Canadian at left tackle and doing a darn good job. This is impressive.
Well, and it's important because I've talked ad nauseum that this team has not always had the greatest track record at developing Canadian offensive linemen, but I think what has been exciting has been the development of Canadians at non-Canadian positions, for lack of a better term. We saw what we've seen so far this year. We know what Ken Schaefer-Baker can do if he's healthy. We know what Sam Emilus, I almost blanked out there, can do when he's healthy, right?
Yeah.
Like they are complete players, especially Emilus, the way he mauls people downfield. And then Del Duncan Busby, we know that when he's, playing at the top of his game, they've got three really good Canadian receivers, and if they can get them all healthy at the same time, look out. So, as far as having two Canadians in the secondary, that's always been rare, where you can have one at safety and one at one of the other DB positions. I don't think anybody's surprised that Tavon Campbell's playing well. I think it was more of an unknown because, a lot of those guys who age out from the NFL, they come back and they're either damaged goods or they just, I don't know. If you push me into a job where I'm paid 1/10 of what I used to be, I might not be the most motivated either. But he doesn't look like he's lost a step.
He's totally motivated. He's, like we said earlier in the show, He's made the big bucks in the NFL, but he still wants to play football, and he wants to play football in Saskatchewan.
I think that's a part of it.
As a former Regina Ram. Well, the time goes by too fast with you, Brendan. Unfortunately, I wanted to ask you about 30 other things, but we've run out of time. Brendan McGuire, the voice of the Regina Rams, who, of course, this year will be hosting the Vanier Cup, and that'll be a really cool deal. SportsCage continues in just a moment. Well, on our final sports ticker of the show, all good news for the Toronto Blue Jays. Currently, believe it or not, the bottom of the first inning, the Blue Jays destroying the New York Yankees 7-0. That's right, 7-0 for the good guys. And further good news is Jays first baseman, Vladimir Guerrero, goes to his fourth straight All-Star game. And the Jays, well, they're better than a lot of people think. Today's ticker is brought to you by Steelcraft Doors Regina, made in Western Canada for Western Canada. And it's Don Hewitt, of course, filling in for Barney, who is on vacation, tidying up a few nice par fives. With me in studio is Curtis Gammon, the technical producer of SportsCage. And one thing, Curtis, and I know you're a big Roughrider fan, one guy that is just worth the price of admission for the Saskatchewan Roughriders right now. Every time there's a kick and he's catching it, you're just on the edge of your seats, is Mario Alford. And, during the off season, he got a pretty good salary from the general manager, Jeremy O'Day. And I thought, well, yeah, he's pretty darn good. There's no doubt about it. He's a little older. He's been electrifying, Curtis. I mean, it is so much fun to watch the dude.
Yeah, and I guess the funny thing about it, too, is I guess there was a little bit of discussion of whether or not, like, you bring in another guy as, like, a returner, because you were seeing a little bit of a dip from Mario, and it's like, okay, like, do you bring in another guy into that room for a little bit of competition? And I definitely believe that conversation has kind of been silenced.
Oh, it's completely silenced.
Yeah, and a fun fact is that he's actually tied for 4th for all-time TD returns in the CFL. So he just needs another one, and then he's I believe then he's tied for 3rd at 13, but he's sitting at 12. And another dangerous returner that I know he's sitting at 12 is Janarian Grant. So he those are the only 2 active players that I know that are kind of high up on the list. But
well, the best in the CFL, wouldn't you agree, are Alford and Grant. Grant just came back last week. Those 2, either one can go the distance at any time.
Yes, sir. Big fan.
And another thing that I really liked, the fact that, what the heck, Jake Mayer didn't throw any interceptions, so good for him. Anyway, we've got to take a break. SportsCage continues in just a moment.